My knees nearly buckled as the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Heat rushed to my face, followed by an icy wave that prickled down my spine. There on my kitchen counter lay the property deed to my $450,000 home, my name crossed out in careful pencil strokes. Not a copy, but the original document Charles and I had signed 37 years ago when we'd scraped together every penny for the $78,000 down payment. My fingers hovered over the alteration, not daring to touch it, as though the violation might transfer to my skin. My name is Harriet Jennings. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my only son, James, was secretly trying to take my home of nearly 4 decades, and how I used my 32 years of financial expertise to stop him. If this situation resonates with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I placed the deed back exactly as I'd found it, aligning the edges precisely. Through the kitchen window, I watched my son James pacing the back patio, gesturing emphatically into his phone. We can start renovations next month. Yes, the assisted living place has an opening in the West Wing. Mom won't need much space anyway. Each word pierced me like broken glass. The West Wing, the smallest rooms at Sunny Pines, barely 215 square feet. I'd visited there with my garden club last spring. Those rooms barely fit a twin bed and dresser. My hands trembled violently as I filled the kettle, spilling water across the counter. Through the window, I watched my son, the little boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and driven to countless soccer practices, now a stranger in expensive loafers, trampling my heirloom roses, planning my future without consulting me. It had started innocently after my husband Charles died. "Mom, let me set up automatic bill pay for you," James had suggested after finding an overdue electric notice. I'd been drowning in grief, grateful for the assistance. Then came, "I'll organize your financial papers," which somehow resulted in my documents migrating to his house. "I've consolidated your accounts," he'd announced, handing me a simplified statement that excluded transaction details. Small things, easily dismissed. References to my confusion when I questioned missing statements. The day my son suggested I stop driving after a minor fender bender, never mind it was the other driver's fault. The gradual disappearance of my mail, which James insisted on collecting because walking to the mailbox had become too dangerous after I'd twisted my ankle. Amma, my 16-year-old granddaughter, burst through the back door. "Grandma," Dad said, "you're making tea. Can I have some?" "Of course, sweetheart." "How was school?" "Boring, except for economics. We're learning about property values. Dad says your house has like tripled in value since you bought it." I maintained a neutral expression while my stomach twisted into knots. "Is that so? Interesting timing for that lesson." "Yeah, he and Mom were talking about it last night. Something about the neighborhood becoming desirable and leveraging assets. Then they got all quiet when I walked in. The pieces clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The renovation plans. The assisted living brochures, accidentally left on my coffee table. The sudden interest in my property deed. James ended his call and headed inside, wearing that artificially bright smile that always preceded announcements about what was best for me. "I've been thinking about these steps. They're getting pretty steep for you." "The steps are the same height they've been for 37 years. He laughed, the sound strained. "Well, you're not the same height you were 37 years ago. You've shrunk at least an inch." I straightened my spine, feeling a surge of something beyond fear, something like anger. Half an inch, according to my last physical. Which reminds me, I need my latest bank statement for my doctor's insurance claim. His eyes flickered nervously to the counter where he'd left the deed. "I'll email you a copy." Anyway, I wanted to talk about some exciting options for the future. After my son left with Emma, I walked to my bedroom and slid back the closet panel concealing our old safe. Inside lay my true treasures, our original property deed, complete financial records for the past 7 years, and Charles's life insurance policy. While James believed he'd taken control of my paperwork, I'd been keeping duplicate copies of everything. I added the property tax assessment showing the home's current value at $450,000 to the file. Then I removed my old work notebook and wrote, Operation Home Preservation Day. The tightness in my chest began to ease, replaced by a calm determination I recognized from my working days. James had forgotten what his mother had done for 32 years at the school district. I hadn't just processed paperwork. I'd managed multi-million-dollar budgets, uncovered embezzlement schemes, and testified in court about financial discrepancies. I smiled as I closed the notebook. My son had made a critical error. He had underestimated the woman who had taught him everything he knew about money. The next morning, I woke with purpose. I hadn't slept this well since before Charles died. My tea was steeping when Clara Martinez knocked on my back door, a basket of freshly cut zinnias in hand.
Morning, Harriet.
Thought these might brighten your kitchen. Clara had been my neighbor for 30 years, a retired legal secretary with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. Perfect timing, I said. James stopped by yesterday. Clara's eyebrow arched. Oh? And how is your devoted son, who suddenly visits 3 times a week after barely managing monthly dinners for years? I smiled at her directness. Concerned about my welfare, particularly these treacherous front steps, and my inability to maintain such a large property. Funny how your property wasn't too large when you were hosting his wedding reception or babysitting his children every weekend. Clara sipped her tea. Or when you're tending that garden that's won the Neighborhood Association Award 5 years running. Apparently, I'm shrinking and confused now. I arranged her flowers. Did you know that Thompson's house sold for $400,000? And yours would fetch more with that corner lot and your landscaping. Clara's eyes narrowed. Has James mentioned Sunny Pines to you yet? My hand froze midway to my cup. How did you know? I saw him there last week when I was visiting my cousin. He was taking a tour of the West Wing, where they put people who aren't high maintenance, meaning people whose children don't want to pay for the better rooms. I told her about the altered deed, the renovation discussions, the financial help that had gradually removed my access to my own accounts. That's elder financial abuse, Clara said flatly. In my 30 years at Johnson & Schaefer Law, I've seen this pattern dozens of times. The isolation, the gaslighting about your mental capacity, taking over finances, classic signs. He's still my son, I said quietly. And you're still a person with rights. Clara's voice gentled. What does your gut tell you? That I need to reclaim control without destroying my relationship with my only child and my grandchildren. Clara nodded. Smart approach. First step is information gathering. How much do you know about your current financial situation? I led her to my bedroom, showing her the safe with my duplicate records. Her eyes widened. You crafty thing. You've been 10 steps ahead all along. 32 years of financial administration teaches you to keep backup documentation. I pulled out my recent bank statements. James has been managing my accounts, but I've been tracking every transaction. There's $400 missing from my savings that I can't account for. Does James have financial troubles? Clara asked. I frowned. He's always been image conscious. The luxury car, private school for the kids, expensive vacations, but he's sales director at TechSphere. They're doing well. Are they? My nephew works in their accounting department. There have been layoffs. This was news to me. James hasn't mentioned anything. Maybe he wouldn't, Clara said gently. Not if he's tapping your accounts while presenting himself as your financial savior. I need access to my accounts, I said. James changed all my passwords for security reasons. Clara smiled. Let's start there. My grandson taught me some interesting things about account recovery. By lunchtime, we'd recovered access to my email and checking account. The statements revealed steady withdrawals over the past 6 months, always under $1,000, probably assuming I wouldn't notice smaller amounts. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a recurring payment. $300 monthly to property management services. I'm not using any property management. The search revealed a company registered to Melissa's brother. More connections formed in my mind. At First National, I asked to speak with the manager. Roberto Diaz had been handling my accounts for 15 years. "Mrs. Jennings, your son mentioned you weren't getting out much anymore." I straightened to my full 5'3". That's interesting, considering I volunteer at the library twice weekly and attend garden club meetings every Thursday. Roberto's expression shifted. "How can I help you today?" "I need a complete accounting of all transactions on my accounts for the past year, and I want to remove James as an authorized user immediately." "Of course. But your son mentioned some concerns about your memory." I pulled out my state ID and social security card. "I believe these and my signature matching your records should suffice. Unless there's some documentation of my supposed incapacity." An hour later, I had full control of my accounts again, and a disturbing picture of my financial situation. James had withdrawn nearly $24,000 over the past year. Back home, Clara helped me organize the documents. "What's your next move?" "Information gathering. I need to understand exactly what James is planning and why." That opportunity came sooner than expected. Emma called asking if she could come over after school to work on a project. When she arrived, she seemed nervous. "Grandma, can I ask you something weird? Dad and Mom were arguing last night about you. Dad said the transition plan was taking too long, and Mom said they needed the liquidity from your house because of something that happened at Dad's work." "That is interesting. Do you know what happened at your dad's job?" "I'm not supposed to know, but I heard Mom crying. Dad's whole division is being cut next month. He'll get some severance, but..." Emma bit her lip. "They said they'd have to pull us out of private school unless they figure something out fast." The final piece locked into place. James wasn't just being controlling. He was desperate. After Emma left, I went to my garden. As I knelt in the soil, turning over the rich earth around my perennials, I realized I was reclaiming more than just my financial independence. I was reclaiming my right to determine my own future. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Coming by tomorrow to take you to look at Sunny Pines. 10 a.m., exciting opportunity." I texted back, looking forward to it. But by 10 a.m. tomorrow, I would be ready with questions and documentation that would make James realize his mother was neither confused nor easily manipulated. The seeds of my counterplan were already sprouting. The morning of the Sunny Pines tour, I was up at dawn. I dressed in my navy pantsuit, the one I'd worn to board meetings, and arranged my documentation in a leather portfolio. When James arrived, I was waiting on the porch, not inside where he could hustle me to his car. "Mom, you're ready early." His voice held surprised approval, as if I'd completed a simple task beyond expectations. "I've always valued punctuality, James." I gestured to my garden. "The dahlias are spectacular this year. 38 years of soil amendments paying off. That's the difference between 5 years of gardening and nearly 4 decades, patience and foundation work." His smile flickered. "Should we get going? The tour starts at 10. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to talk about something important first. Let's sit." Once seated, I opened my portfolio. I received an interesting call from Roberto at the bank. "He mentioned you'd been helping with my finances." James's shoulders tensed. "I've been managing things, so you don't have to worry. Perhaps you could explain these particular transactions." I handed him printouts showing withdrawals totaling. The color drained from his face. "Mom, there's a simple explanation." "I'm sure there is. Just as there's an explanation for why property management services owned by Melissa's brother is receiving monthly payments from my account." or why my deed has pencil marks showing my name crossed out. His expression transformed from confidence to shock. You? How did James, I managed a $3.2 million school district budget for 15 years. Did you think I wouldn't notice money disappearing from my accounts? He stood abruptly. This isn't what it looks like. We're trying to help you. By moving me to Sunny Pines while renovating my house without my knowledge or consent, you need care. This house is too much for you. I stood, meeting his gaze steadily. I deadhead 113 rose bushes every week, manage my own vegetable garden, and volunteer at 2 community organizations. I am neither incapable nor confused. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Melissa and I are facing financial difficulties because your division at TechSphere is being eliminated next month. I finished softly. He staggered slightly. How did you know that? I pay attention, James. I know about the credit card debt too. He collapsed back into the chair, the facade crumbling. We're drowning, Mom. The severance package isn't enough. The kids' tuition is due. The mortgage is underwater. We thought that my house could solve your problems. I sat beside him.
Why didn't you just ask for help?
Would you have given me $200,000? His bitterness surprised me. I don't have $200,000 liquid, as you well know, but we could have discussed options that didn't involve deceiving me and taking my home. He ran his hands through his hair. I didn't know what else to do. Melissa's talking about divorce if we have to pull the kids from Westlake Academy. So you decided the solution was to move me to the cheapest rooms at Sunny Pines and take over my property? My voice remained calm. Did you consider how it would feel to be dismissed as confused and incapable when I've spent my life being competent and independent? Shame flickered across his face. I told myself it was for your own good. A convenient story that happened to solve your financial problems. What are you going to do? First, you're going to repay the $24,000 you took from my accounts. I don't have it. That's the whole point. Then we'll create a repayment plan with proper documentation. I removed another paper from my portfolio. I've already drafted one. He scanned it, his expression shifting from defiance to defeat. You've thought of everything. Not everything, but enough. I leaned forward. James, I raised you to face problems honestly. When did that change? When Dad died, he was always so successful. I was trying to live up to that. Then the market crashed, and suddenly we were underwater on everything. Pride is expensive, I said quietly. It cost us our trust. A tear slid down his cheek, the first I'd seen since his father's funeral. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I believe you, but trust requires more than apologies. It requires changed behavior. What happens now? He asked. Now we deal with this honestly. I'm willing to help with your financial situation, but not by giving up my home or independence. I handed him a folder. After Charles died, I took a financial planning course for widows. These are alternative suggestions for your situation, including bankruptcy options that would protect your retirement accounts while resolving the debt. His eyes widened. You prepared all this? Even after discovering what I was planning? You're still my son, James. And contrary to what you've been telling people, my mind works perfectly well. The grandfather clock chimed 10:30. I believe we've missed our tour of Sunny Pines. I guess we have. I made an appointment with Mr. Peterson at First National for 11:30. I thought we might discuss a proper financial plan, one that solves your problems without sacrificing my independence. James looked at me with new eyes, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person with agency and wisdom. As we drove to the bank, I realized something important had shifted. For the first time in years, James was seeing me, really seeing me, not as an elderly burden, but as Harriet Jennings, the capable woman who had raised him, the financial administrator whose skills he'd forgotten. the woman who refused to be erased from her own life. The meeting with Mr. Peterson was eye-opening for James. I watched his expression shift from defensiveness to shock as the banker laid out his financial situation. Based on your current debt-to-income ratio, Mr. Jennings, you're carrying approximately $86,000 in unsecured debt with interest rates averaging 21%. That's nearly $1,500 monthly just in interest payments. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses. Meanwhile, your mortgage is $42,000. James stared at the printout. When you put it all together like this, financial problems compound when hidden, I said gently. I spent decades teaching students that math doesn't improve when ignored. We reviewed 3 options: a debt consolidation loan, using my home as collateral that would remain in my name, bankruptcy protection, preserving James's retirement accounts, or a structured family loan with legal protections. I need to discuss this with Melissa, James said finally. Of course. In the meantime, I'd like to formalize the protection of my property. I slid the document Clara had helped me prepare across the table. This states that you acknowledge my full ownership of my home and renounce any claims against it. James signed without hesitation. I'm sorry, Mom. I really thought I was helping. During the drive home, James gripped the steering wheel. Mom, did you know about any of Dad's financial problems? The question caught me off guard. What problems? Before he died, Dad borrowed against his life insurance policy. That's why the payout was so much smaller than you expected. This was news to me. Charles never mentioned any loans. He was trying to help me with my first mortgage. He didn't want you to worry. James's voice was tight. I guess keeping financial secrets runs in the family. I processed this revelation as we pulled into my driveway. The difference, James, is that Charles was trying to protect me by sacrificing his own resources. You were trying to protect yourself by sacrificing mine. He flinched. That's fair. Let's break this pattern, I said. Complete honesty from now on. Inside, Emma was waiting anxiously. Is everything okay? You guys missed the Sunny Pines tour. We found a better solution, I told her. One that doesn't involve me moving anywhere. Relief flooded her face. Really, so you're staying home? That's awesome, Grandma. James cleared his throat. Emma, there are going to be some changes for our family. We need to be more careful with money for a while. Her face fell. So I can't go to France with the language club this summer? We'll need to discuss things like that, he admitted. But Grandma's helping us figure it out. After they left, Clara came over for tea. Her approval was clear as I recounted the day's events. You handled that perfectly, she said. Professional but compassionate, setting boundaries without burning bridges. It's not over yet, I cautioned. Melissa may have other ideas. Clara snorted. Melissa's been measuring your living room for her dream renovation for years, but now you have legal protection, and James seems to understand the gravity of what he almost did. He's still in financial trouble, I said, and I'm still his mother, which means you help appropriately, not by sacrificing your security. Clara raised her eyebrow. You have a plan, don't you? I smiled. I'm considering several options, including renting out my guest room to generate extra income. My garden club friend, Dorothy, is moving back from Arizona next month. We've already discussed splitting utilities and groceries. The next day, I met with my old colleague, Harold, now a part-time financial advisor. This is solid planning, Harriet, he said, reviewing my documents. The equity line of credit will give you leverage to help James if you choose to, while keeping the property fully in your control. And the trust provisions, smart. They ensure your home can't be sold without your express consent, even if health issues arise. The provision for your grandchildren's education is generous without compromising your security. I felt a weight lifting. I want to help my family without enabling poor decisions. Balance is key, Harold agreed. Now, About your investments, you've been too conservative since Charles died. With some adjustments, we could increase your monthly income by By the time I returned home, I felt more in control than I had in years. I was deadheading roses when Emma showed up unexpectedly. Grandma, can I hang out for a while? Mom and Dad are fighting about money again. Of course, sweetheart. I handed her pruning shears. Want to help? The dahlias need deadheading. As we worked side by side, Emma gradually opened up. Dad says we might have to move to a smaller house. Mom keeps crying and saying it's humiliating. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes financial setbacks feel like failure, but they're actually opportunities to reassess what truly matters. Like what? Like family relationships, personal growth. Finding happiness that doesn't depend on impressing others. Emma snipped a faded bloom. Mom says our address matters for social connections. And do those connections help when real troubles come? I asked gently. She considered this. Not really. Nobody from Mom's country club offered to help when Dad lost his job. True friends stand by you regardless of your address. Emma worked quietly for a moment. Is that why you're helping Dad even though he tried to take your house? My shears paused mid-cut. How did you know about that? I heard Mom on the phone. She said the house plan fell through because you were sharper than they thought. Emma's eyes met mine. Were they really going to make you move to Sunny Pines? They thought it was a solution to several problems at once.
That's messed up.
Emma's indignation warmed my heart. You love this house, and you're like the most put-together person I know. So why are you still helping them? I'd be so mad. A cardinal landed on the garden fence, a flash of red against the greenery. Being right doesn't always bring happiness, Emma. Neither does holding grudges. I'm helping because I can, because I love you all, and because teaching accountability works better than punishment. She absorbed this, her young face thoughtful. You're kind of amazing, Grandma. I've had 68 years of practice. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And I'm teaching you my secrets, so you'll be even more amazing. Later that evening, Melissa called the first direct contact she'd initiated in months. Harriet, she began stiffly. James told me about your discussion at the bank. I wanted to thank you for your assistance. Family helps family, Melissa, the right way. A pause hung between us. James mentioned something about bankruptcy being an option. It's one possibility. It would eliminate the credit card debt while protecting your retirement savings. But people would know. Her voice tightened. Our friends, the school community. People already know when you're struggling. Melissa, they just don't mention it out of politeness. After discussing the Children's Education Fund protection and my plans for a college expense trust, Melissa's voice softened. We arranged to meet Thursday afternoon to discuss options further. As I hung up, I realized I was standing straighter, speaking more confidently than I had in years. The weight of being overlooked and dismissed had been lifting incrementally with each reclaimed piece of my independence. I wasn't just securing my home, I was rebuilding myself. The meeting with Melissa revealed her true priorities. As we reviewed financial options in my living room, her facade cracked when she realized I wouldn't relinquish my property. But the equity in this house could solve everything, she insisted, voice rising. You don't need all this space. What I need isn't for others to decide, I replied evenly. And solving your financial problems isn't my responsibility. We're family, her manicured nails tapped against the teacup. You'd rather see us struggle than share what you have? I'm offering substantial help, just not my home. Melissa's composure slipped further. You're being selfish. This house is wasted on one person. Do you know what we could do with a property like this? The renovation potential alone. Is that what this was about? Renovation potential? I kept my voice calm, though my heart raced. Not my well-being or safety. She flushed. Of course we care about your welfare. Sunny Pines would provide appropriate care. the West Wing, the smallest rooms available, while you remodeled my home of 37 years into something unrecognizable. After she left, James called, his voice tight with controlled anger. Mom, what did you say to Melissa? She's been crying for hours. I simply clarified that while I'm happy to help with your financial situation, I won't be moving to Sunny Pines or signing over my home. We're trying to help you by taking my home without my knowledge or consent. That's not help, James. That's exploitation. After a tense silence, he suggested, we should discuss this as a family. Sunday dinner, everyone present. I recognized the strategy surrounding me with allies to pressure compliance. That sounds appropriate. I'll host. 5 o'clock. His surprise was audible. You want to host? It's still my home, James. I'll expect everyone at 5. I spent the next days preparing methodically. Clara helped me organize documentation chronologically and create visual aids showing the timeline of James's interventions. I invited Robert Winters, Charles's oldest friend and a retired banker who'd known our family for decades, to provide external perspective. Sunday morning, I cooked Charles's favorite pot roast, a deliberate choice to evoke family memories, and arranged the dining room strategically. The table was set with my best china, family photographs lined the sideboard, and my portfolio of evidence sat unobtrusively nearby. Robert arrived first, his presence adding gravitas. Then Clara, James, Melissa, and my grandchildren arrived precisely at 5, tension evident in their rigid postures. Dinner conversation remained artificially light. As I served apple pie, James cleared his throat. Mom, we wanted to talk about some concerns we have about your living situation. Yes, I believe we do. I stood and retrieved my portfolio. But first, I'd like to share some concerns of my own. I laid out the first document, a timeline showing the gradual transfer of my financial control to James. Over the past 7 years, I've been systematically removed from managing my own affairs through what appeared to be helpful interventions. James shifted uncomfortably. Mom, that's not fair. You were overwhelmed after Dad died. For a time, yes, but that doesn't explain these actions. I pointed to entries from the past year, intercepting my mail, changing passwords without providing the new ones, withdrawing funds without documentation, and attempting to alter property records. Robert leaned forward, his banker's eyes narrowing at the financial records. James, is this accurate? It's more complicated than Mom's making it sound, James began defensively. Actually, it's quite straightforward. I placed bank statements on the table. $24,000 withdrawn from my accounts, without my knowledge or consent. Property documentation altered. Plans made to relocate me to assisted living while renovating my home for eventual sale. Emma gasped. Dad, you were really going to make Grandma move? Melissa jumped in. We were trying to create a better situation for everyone. Your grandmother wouldn't have to maintain this big house, and we could what? Clara asked pointedly. Benefit from her equity while she lived in the smallest rooms at Sunny Pines? Robert examined the bank statements, his expression grave. James, these transactions constitute elder financial abuse. As a former banker, I'm legally obligated to report such activities if I become aware of them. The color drained from James's face. This is absurd. I was helping manage Mom's affairs. Without transparency or consent, I said softly. That's not management. It's manipulation. What do you want? Melissa demanded, tears of frustration brimming. To see us lose everything, to have the children change schools, to watch us declare bankruptcy while you sit in this big house alone. What I want is acknowledgement of what happened, restoration of what was taken, and respect for my autonomy going forward. And if we refuse? Melissa's challenge hung in the air. Robert answered before I could. Then, as Harriet's friend and financial advisor, I would be compelled to involve adult protective services and possibly law enforcement. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. James stared at his hands. I never thought of it as abuse. Few people do when they believe they're acting in someone else's best interest, I said gently. But making decisions for someone capable of making their own is always a form of control. I laid out my proposal, a structured repayment plan for the missing funds, formal acknowledgement of my property rights, and family financial counseling. In return, I'm willing to provide significant help with your financial situation, including co-signing a debt consolidation loan using a portion of my home equity as collateral. The property remains in my name, but you receive the help you need. James looked up, confusion and hope warring in his expression. After everything we tried to do, you'd still help us? You're my son. Emma and Lucas are my grandchildren. Family helps family, the right way. As the evening ended, James lingered after the others had moved to the living room. Mom, I don't know what to say. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting my pride. Understanding that is the first step toward repair. How can you be so calm about this? So forgiving. I'm not merely forgiving, James. I'm setting clear boundaries with consequences. That's different from simply forgetting or enabling. You're remarkable, he said softly. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a problem to solve, or a resource to use, I added gently. He winced. Yes, I'm deeply ashamed of that. In the living room, Emma watched me with new eyes. Grandma, that was amazing. You were so strong. Strength comes in many forms, sweetheart. Sometimes it's quiet and goes unnoticed until it's needed. Will you teach me how to be like that? Strong but not mean? Clear but not cruel? I smiled. That's the best request I've received in years. After everyone left, I sat alone in my garden as dusk settled. The confrontation had gone better than I'd dared hope, not because I'd won, but because truth had created the possibility of authentic healing. My home remained mine. My autonomy was acknowledged. My voice had been heard. And in that moment of quiet triumph, I realized I'd reclaimed something even more precious than my property. I'd reclaimed myself. The weeks following our family confrontation brought changes both subtle and profound. James and Melissa restructured their debt with professional help. The repayment plan for my $24,000 was properly documented, and all my financial accounts were restored to my sole control. But the most significant transformations weren't financial. James no longer spoke to me in that condescending tone. When he needed my signature on loan documents, he brought them early and said, "Take your time, Mom. Ask any questions you need." Even Melissa's attitude shifted gradually. Her initial resentment softened as their finances stabilized. When she mentioned Sunny Pines now, it was only to share news about her aunt, who'd moved there voluntarily. "The East Wing is quite nice," she admitted one afternoon, "but not nearly as homey as your place." Coming from Melissa, this was significant progress. Emma began spending Saturday mornings in my garden, learning about each plant while we discussed everything from school pressures to financial independence for women. "Mom says you were really good with money at your job," she mentioned as we divided hostes. "Could you teach me about managing money?" Thus began our financial literacy lessons. We started with basic budgeting, then moved to compound interest and investment principles. "Grandma, did you know only 41% of women are confident about their retirement savings compared to 56% of men?" she announced one day, tablet in hand. "What do you think causes that difference?" I asked. "Women are taught to be nice, instead of financially savvy," she declared, with teenage certainty. "Like how those people at Sunny Pines were nicer to Dad than to you, just because he's a man and you're just an old lady." I smiled at her indignation. The world has many such biases, but knowing they exist is the first step toward not being limited by them. Even Lucas, my 14-year-old grandson, typically more interested in basketball than family dynamics, began helping with yard work without being asked. Dad said you should call us for stuff like moving these planters, he told me. He said we need to do better about helping you stay independent. Clara introduced me to her senior advocacy group, where I eventually volunteered as a financial literacy instructor for older women, many with stories disturbingly similar to mine. It's called Inheritance Impatience, explained Marie, a retired attorney in the group. Adult children making decisions about assets they view as eventually theirs anyway. Your story gives others courage to speak up. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurred within me. The stooped posture I'd unconsciously adopted after Charles died gradually straightened. I found myself speaking more confidently in community meetings and social gatherings. When the neighborhood association discussed property development restrictions, I gave a detailed presentation that earned appreciative nods from much younger neighbors. 6 months after the confrontation, James called with unexpected news. "Mom, I got a new job, better than the one at TechSphere." The financial stability we've established made a huge difference in the interview process. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it completely. "You've faced your problems honestly." "Thanks to you," he replied. "Your strength forced me to find mine." Later that week, I hosted a garden party. Clara gestured toward James, who was helping serve refreshments. "Look at that transformation," she murmured. "From plotting to take your home to serving tea in it. People can change when given the right motivation." "And you?" she asked. "How would you describe your transformation?" I watched Emma explain my prized roses to another guest. I'd stopped seeing myself clearly. I'd accepted others' diminished version of who I was. Now I remember. Remember what? That I've always been capable. That age has added to my wisdom, not subtracted from it. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. As twilight softened the garden's edges, I sat between Emma and James on the porch swing, the same swing where Charles and I had spent countless evenings watching our garden grow through the seasons. "Mom," James said quietly, "I want to apologize again, not just for what I almost did, but for how I've treated you these past years. The way I spoke to you, made decisions without consulting you. I was wrong." "You've already apologized," I reminded him. "And more importantly, you've changed your behavior. That matters more than words." Emma leaned against my shoulder. "Dad says you saved our family." "We saved ourselves by finally being honest with each other," I corrected gently. "Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the best outcomes." Later, alone in my garden as fireflies began their evening dance, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal that had nearly cost me my home had ultimately restored something more valuable: my sense of self, my voice, my power. The property deed remained securely in my name. My financial independence was protected. But beyond these tangible victories lay the greater transformation: a family rebuilt on honesty rather than manipulation, respect rather than assumption. I touched the soil of my garden, rich with 37 years of cultivation. Like this garden, relationships required continuous tending, weeding out harmful patterns, nourishing healthy growth, maintaining clear boundaries. In reclaiming my home, I had reclaimed much more, not just my property or finances, but my essential self, temporarily overlooked but never truly diminished. As the evening star appeared above my roses, I smiled at the perfect symmetry. Like my garden returning after winter, I had bloomed again. Have you experienced a situation where standing up for yourself actually improved a relationship instead of damaging it? I'd love to hear your story. Click subscribe and share your experience in the comments section below.